All right, everybody, let's get started. My name is Murph Krajewski. I'm with Sharpen Technologies. I am so excited to be talking with Lori Bocklund from Strategic Contact. Lori, how you doing?
Good. Hello, Murph. Hello, everybody.
Today we are going to talk about the 2020 being the year of the agent, and we're going to do some pretty deep diving into strategic contact and contact center pipelines, contact center challenges and priorities survey. Just a quick word of warning. You're going to see a lot of words and bar charts at the beginning of this. Don't try to read every word because you're just going to get lost. I would encourage you to just kind of stay with us in conversation, and then after this webinar, we're actually going to send you the survey so you can circle it up and make arrows and notes and all that kind of stuff after the fact. But I didn't want you to get distracted by the voluminous data that's going to be up on screen here in just a minute. So again, welcoming Lori Bocklund. My name is Murph Krajewski. If you've been in the contact center industry for any amount of time, you've doubtlessly run across Lori's name. And so I'm also assuming that she's a large part of the reason why you're here today, which is great. If you have not, if you're new to the contact industry space, you are in the right place. You're going to get a lot of knowledge very quickly. And the goal for today is to send you away with actionable little bits of intel that you can do something different in your contact center today without having to spend a dollar or make any major decisions, just things that you can do to start improving things right away for your agents. So, okay, without any further ado, let's get into it. Lori, the high-level view of the challenges and priorities report. Let's get started. What do you think?
Yeah, and I love the photo. I was just in New York City. So this is our 5th year of doing the Challenges and Priorities survey, and we have a great group of people that participate every year and basically pick their top 3 challenges and top 3 priorities from a list. And then I dive into the data and have fun analyzing it and see what it's telling us and compare it to previous years. And for 2020, basically attrition catapulted to #1. It always vies for #1, and it's not #1 every year. But this year, it took a big lead. It jumped up to 27% of our participants picking that, up from 19% last year. So we know it's a big pain point, and that makes sense with the unemployment rate the way it is, with things like Amazon offering, $15 an hour for a job that might on the surface look better in sense of being easier and maybe have some different hours and things like that. So there's a lot of dynamics at play on the attrition challenge, but that's one that we know is basically a high pain point for everybody. And as Murph said, this thing's going to show you all the other things that we asked people about and what the rankings were there. And you see things like the desktop tools, kind of another perennial high problem. But we're going to talk about a lot of the specifics around this as we go through the session, and also talk a bit about our priorities as well. So let's go into a little bit more depth on some of this as we move through the discussion.
Well, we also kind of talked a little bit about how the agent engagement and the understanding of the respect for the contact center's role has kind of jumped up a little bit higher than it has in past years.
Yeah, that's that next one that Murph's got highlighted. So you got the high attrition highlight there, and then the other one, the lack of understanding and respect for the center's role, what I call the Rodney Dangerfield issue. Just can't get no respect. That one did jump up quite a bit this year. And again, it's one that's kind of always looming out there and people kind of highlighting it. But when we get into the priorities, you'll see we talk about that people tend not to prioritize it as much. But it's one that's definitely a pain point, and I think contributes to the attrition problem because it can impact funding. It can impact how that role of the agent is treated in general. How others view it, how much they want to get out of that center and move to some other job in the company, in the organization. So it definitely has an impact and can play a role in how well centers do, how well they operate, and how much those agents hang around.
So one thing that I thought was really interesting as I was digging through the challenges and then as I looked at the priorities on the other side, It seemed as though there might have been a little bit of kind of a misalignment might be the right word for it, but I wondered if the high challenges and the low priorities kind of maybe indicate that people may be digging in the wrong place. And I'm a big Indiana Jones fan, so thanks for indulging me my little inside joke, everyone. But as I kind of focused on some of the priorities that came up lower in the list, it was interesting that, you know, I kind of thought the things that people should be focusing on to move the needle on agent attrition and respect for the contact center and agent engagement may not necessarily have been high enough on the priorities list. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and it's the alignment is something that I look at every year, and when the folks on the webinar here get the article, they'll see there's a section in the back where we talk about the alignment. We do word clouds and all kinds of things to kind of assess that. And using that respect one as an example, you know, we get people putting that as a lower priority. We think our theory is that part of the things that impact is how hard is it to prioritize that, right? How hard is it to solve that problem? So when you look at what people put in the challenges, you know, they're kind of reacting to the things they feel every day. When they put their priorities, they're probably saying, well, what do I think I can accomplish this year? What am I charged with accomplishing, right? And so leadership may not have visibility or awareness about those kinds of problems, or be willing to put the investment into that. And there's others here. So Murph's got a slide up here that kind of highlights a bunch of the other things. The no budget for technology investments, the lack of integration across omni-channel. So omni-channel is something we've been talking about for 10 plus years, right? But people still think, well, we're not doing this so well. For a lot of centers, that's reflected in silos of technology, silos of how they handle things. And then you see some of the things when we talk about the priorities here in a second, you see some things down here in the training and the coaching and development that bump way up high on the priorities list, right? And so that's the kind of thing that's maybe front of mind for, I can do something about this, right? So they're going to jump in and try and address those kinds of things. So that misalignment that you alluded to, Murph, I think is very much a real element that centers struggle with. And it's part of what I think makes the survey interesting every year, to see what kind of alignment we're getting and how these priorities and challenges kind of jockey for position, if you will, based on what's happening in the marketplace and what priorities leadership's putting on people.
Well, and I'll put up kind of a focused version of that priorities list, and maybe you can walk us down a little bit of what some people are concerned with.
Yeah, and so Murph's highlighted the improved employee engagement and empowerment, one of the great hot buttons that's out there in the marketplace, and it again kind of jostles for number one with self-service that you see there as well. And there you see the raise awareness of the center's vital role and impact, kind of halfway down the list, and that's kind of that counterpart to the we can't get no respect, right? So there's some awareness of that, of the center's role, and people think, oh, maybe I can work on it. And a few people are obviously saying, I'm going to put it on the top of my list. One of my great clients I had over the years, she made that her number one priority one year. That was her job, was to like make everybody aware, what do we do here? How do we impact the customer and the company's relationships with the customer? And how does a different department impact the center? And what do we rely on them for? So it can become a really great priority that can have a lot of positive impact on how the center operates and how employees feel about that environment. So there's some interesting things there. We'll talk again some more if you focus your eyes on the first couple yellow ones there. I mentioned this earlier, the coaching and development, and then you also see things like automating processes. Right. So those are things that people really know they need to focus on when you're trying to do improving engagement and empowerment. It's one of my hot buttons, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more here about doing something tangible. Right. That statement in itself, we actually added it, I forget, 3-4 years ago. I didn't have it initially because we kind of felt like, it's not really a thing in itself. Right. You do other things to enable that. But we had people doing write-ins, and we always respond to that. So my big hot button around the engagement and empowerment is, what tangible things are you going to do to make that happen? And of course, coaching and development is one of the best things that you can do. Improving processes, automating processes, of course, with the technology in the marketplace today, and again, we'll talk more about that. That's a huge opportunity, and it's one of the things that can go straight to the attrition problem as well, because a lot of times why people are leaving is they feel like they can't succeed. The processes are too complex. There's too many things to know, especially as I'm sure a lot of our listeners have a lot of regulatory and compliance pressure that they're feeling. So it's this job that's hard and is getting harder, and it's under kind of a relentless pressure. So things we can do to help agents succeed can help that attrition problem, I think.
Yeah, and then there's a few other things that kind of help us work our way down the list in terms of some tools and other collaboration, things like that.
Yeah, and you see again the relatively low on the list, but things that we think are important, and we want to see people do more with those. It's interesting every year we kind of see a little bit of a misalignment around the performance and workload stuff, and you see there that improved performance management. Most centers do struggle to always meet their KPIs, and we're going to talk about that, using the right ones, and of course, collaborating with other departments is a key to success. So we'd like to see those things kind of bump up the list a bit if we could.
Yeah. So, okay, before we leave the bar graphs and the lots of words and numbers here and start talking a little more practically, we did have a question come in, Lori, about how many respondents you had on this survey.
It's about 300. I've got the survey right here. And we do, for those of you who haven't seen the results, we publish it in Contact Center Pipeline, and we slice it where we have enough input. We slice it by vertical. Yeah, there were 275 inputs this year. So we slice it by vertical where we can. We don't always have enough to make that worthwhile, but we do always slice it by size as well and look at that kind of perspective. And then this year we added another question where we asked people about their top business goals in the center, and so that we looked a little bit at the alignment of the challenges and priorities with those as well.
Great. So, okay, I'm going to bring us back to our focus on the year of the agent for 2020, and let's start really digging into some of this stuff, and let's kind of abandon the pretense that there are any easy answers to be found. I mean, it's going to take work. That's what we get paid for, right? Like, that's the job of the contact center leader. So let's start talking about some real practical ways that we can start getting involved here. Let's get started with what you were talking about, more focus on coaching and training.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics, and we do a lot of assessment and planning projects, and as part of those, we hold focus groups. We sometimes do surveys of frontline staff, and one of the things that we ask them is, when was the last time you were coached, or how often do you receive coaching? And we also ask about the ongoing training. And we see kind of some themes emerge out of that. The coaching is basically too low. There's not enough of it. It's too variable. We'll have people in a focus group, somebody will say, oh, I haven't been coached in 3 months, and somebody else will say, oh, I got coached last week, right? And there may be an implication there that one of them's performing better than the other, but we still want coaching and development to occur. Another theme is it's missed at critical times. We have clients that never do it during peak season, and that may be when the agents are the most stressed and feeling like, hey, I want to feel like my leader cares about me, and there's no time taken for that. With the training, we see some trends about it's just an email, or it's a quick update, maybe in a stand-up or a huddle or something. Maybe they have a quiz, so the pressure is about, did you get it? Not necessarily about, I want to nurture you and make sure you feel comfortable with this and get your feedback and everything. So we're really big on pushing people to positively focus on developing staff, no matter what the time of year or the season or whatever it may be, and help them develop in handling contacts and helping them to feel like they can meet the goals that are being set, and that they feel like they have a career path, whether that's within the center or elsewhere in the organization over time. But really that it is a real positive part of what they do every day. And the survey results on the priorities kind of point to some of those things, again, of empowering, engaging, those kinds of things to help them day one, and then to help them develop, again, very intentionally as an ongoing thing through the training, through the coaching, trying to get to that success for everybody. And this coaching and development and training are a key part of that.
Well, I think that leads us really nicely to our takeaway for this part, which is it has to be both a priority and a commitment. It can't be a one-time, 1 hour onboarding session and then just expecting them to figure it out for themselves and, sink or swim. Training has to be ongoing. It's got to be a way of life. And that can be tricky if your tools don't support it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about KPIs in a minute, and this can be part of your KPIs. Do the coaching sessions take place? Do the training hours get spent?
Right. So let's look at the next part. If we're moving towards the year of the agent, what does it really mean to be able to empower and enable your people?
Yeah, so this is another article that I think we're going to send out to our attendees, and I'm all about action. and so one of the articles I wrote in December for Contact Center Pipeline was focused on the engagement concept. And I gave out a couple of assignments, and I think we're going to extend that to our attendees here today. But one of them was basically around employee engagement metrics. So a lot of people do employee engagement surveys. If you don't do one, I use some examples there that you can use the questions. And I basically ask people to assess in regards to those questions and then plan based on them. So basically look at your survey and see if technology positively or negatively impacts the employee experience. And so some typical examples there would be, I have the tools and training to succeed at my job, right? So that's a question that could be on your employee survey, or if you don't have one, again, you can use that as an example. And you can do a self-assessment of your center and look at that and say, do I think that's true? Do I think that people would answer positively? Another one would be, I know what is expected of me. So again, we're going to talk more about metrics, but contact centers are places very rich in metrics. Do people know? Do they have that visibility? Those kinds of things are the first assignment that people can look at to see the role that technology can play in making helping engage agents and making it a positive thing. The second assignment I called a sniff test for technology enablement, and it basically goes through the categories, things like omni-channel routing and reporting and self-service, workforce optimization tools. And basically, as a leader looking and saying, does this contribute to or discourage agent engagement? It's a very simple question. And then once you answer that question, think about what are the problems and what you can do about it, right? So this is really taking you to look at your technology and the role it plays and saying, is it helping or is it hindering, and can I make some changes? That doesn't necessarily mean you replace it or you go buy something new. It may mean you kind of redeploy what you've got or fill in some gaps. There's a lot of different things that you can do there. So that's the second assignment. I hope everybody will take a little time. It's a good lunch discussion, or out on a walk midday. Now that we're hitting spring in a lot of places, it's a good discussion to have.
Well, and I think this gets us to the kind of what I consider to be the central sort of Zen topic of contact center leadership is how do you blend or coordinate the human effort with the technology that you're using. And it's so often that they're just misaligned. And sometimes it's bad processes, and sometimes it's tools that aren't geared to help push those processes forward. And so you just wind up with this weird kind of mishmash of the two competing against each other with a contact center leader stuck in the middle trying to hold it all together. So this is actually my favorite takeaway of the webinar. We need to sniff our metrics, right? So get all your numbers together, do your self-assessments, and then do the sniff test. Make sure that everything smells right. I'm not going to push the sniffing analogy any further than that, but just get a sense of where you stand as a contact center organization today, and I think there will be a lot of revelation just in that little bit of exercise alone. Right. Okay, so let's keep moving towards that technological part of it then. What do we got next here? Let's take a look at our tools themselves.
Yeah, and one of my mantras for a couple of years now has been you can't engage and empower employees until you unburden them. And I coined that because I keep seeing, again, when we do our assessments, we go in and do discovery, we're observing, we're meeting with agents, and we see how the technology can burden them. And we want technology to help them. And so on that same article with the assignments, with my team of consultants, we did a brainstorming session about what are our favorite engagers, and that's another thing people could do. But I think about things, if you want to think about things most people have as a starting point, they might have some kind of instant messaging tool, a collaboration tool. That's a good example of something that can be a great engager, right? And people have been afraid of it in the past because they thought people would abuse it, but it can help people connect, feel like they have someone to reach out to and get an answer. Scorecards and dashboards, doing those right to really provide the right information in line with the metrics and that. Doing bots now, if you want to kind of be more forward-looking, right? So bots can sound like a threat to agents, but if you think about a bot that is an agent assistance type bot, right? So that they don't feel so overwhelmed and that they've got a resource that's helping them do that regulatory compliance and those sorts of things. So I really think it's an exciting time with technology, but we can't just think of it as magic wands. We have to think about how can we really use this to help our agents succeed and plan accordingly, not just plop technology in to do the same things we've done before, or to expect that it's going to miraculously make massive changes. We really need to get the right people involved with those tools and apply them effectively to the business needs. Mark, do you want to highlight any other tools? I threw a few examples out, but do you want to highlight any others?
I actually thought of one this morning when I was driving in. So I was looking at my dashboard on my car, and I've got a readout that tells me my average gas mileage as I'm driving. And I realized that it made me drive differently to just see the number on my dashboard. And that number affects me directly. So if I'm getting 23.5 miles to the gallon in my car, but I could push that up to 24, then I have to pay less for gas, right? And so that dynamic, I mean, in a non-contact center way, also applies to behavior that we've seen some of our customers using with their agents, where if you just simply let them know, like you'd said, what's expected of them and how close are they to hitting that mark, their behavior naturally corrects towards success because people want to do well at their job. So that's actually, that's a big focus on where we're heading in the next near future as well.
Yeah, and it's a world of gaming, right? So that's why gamification has kind of become a hot topic as well.
Okay, so here's our takeaway. We got to make sure that we've got people and processes that are ready to use the tools that we have. Again, that alignment of the human and the technological. So we've talked a little bit about KPIs. Let's dive into that a little bit further.
Yeah, and it's obviously anyone that's been in the contact center a long time or even a short time realizes it's a place driven by metrics, and certainly there's been some evolution of that, especially over the last few years, and as people focus on employee engagement and that sort of thing. But we see a lot of common issues when we, again, do assessments or we're talking with people at conferences or whatever it might be. There's issues of alignment, of do these metrics really align with the business goals, because people want to contribute and be successful. Having too many, we have people overwhelmed with all the different metrics they're looking at, maybe the wrong ones or how they're used. NPS has become a hot metric for the corporation, Net Promoter Score, but it's not necessarily reflecting what happened for that agent on that contact and might be used in the wrong ways. Getting the right level to everybody. I use that example of the leader who wanted the rest of the organization to understand the contact center's contribution. You don't do that by putting out handle time to everybody for every half-hour increment, right? You do that by presenting rolled-up statistics that show the impact on the business goals, whether those are revenue or cost management or growth, whatever those kinds of things may be that people can relate to. And then, of course, you want to get the right more detailed stuff down to the frontline staff and supervisors so they can manage effectively in the moment. And then the other thing we see is just poor communication and definition of those things, making sure that the frontline understands what the metrics mean to them and their performance and the team. Again, these are things that can impact attrition, they can impact attendance, and we really want to use it the right way and hold the right people accountable for the things they can control, right? So that's a key thing, and I mentioned the example earlier of coaching sessions. we've had a lot of times where it's like, you know what, if the supervisors aren't held accountable for holding those coaching sessions, it's easy for them to fall off the radar. So those are examples of things that we see opportunities for people to do things better, and it takes a level of structure and diligence, kind of tied in with what we were just talking about, people to use the tools, right? Just having a great reporting tool doesn't do it in itself. We got to have the right people with the right processes to use the great amounts of data that we can generate in a contact center.
Yeah, I love the way you mentioned that having a great reporting tool itself doesn't necessarily solve the problem. That's one of the things we pride ourselves on making really well is good reporting and dashboard tools. And yet we continue to see people who get frustrated because they think that signing the contract to buy that tool is what's going to fix it. And it's possible to do reporting and metrics well regardless of the tools that you have. And then the tools should just make that even better as you're going forward. I love that perspective. So our takeaway for this one is use the right KPIs, right? Tune them to the behavior that you want to encourage and use them to identify coaching opportunities with your agents. And then, again, the metrics have to encourage the human behavior there. You made a really good mention in that last section as well about surfacing different metrics to different levels. And this is a thing that's near and dear to my heart as well, is how do you keep executives in strategy mode, right? Like, how do you keep them thinking about what you know they value and keep them out of problem-solving mode by getting them too granular of data? What are your thoughts on that?
Down in the weeds, right? Yeah, and it's our chart here focuses on return on investment, and one of the things I would say that the starting point for that is having a good sense of your cost structure. So we find most centers don't have a good handle on that. They know what their budget is, but they might have headcount that's purely based on the budget as opposed to creating a budget based on the headcount they need, right, as an example. So we want people to understand their cost structure as a starting point. Obviously, labor's the biggie, 2/3 to 3/4 of the cost based on our modeling. But we need to look at that and say, okay, I've got my arms around the cost structure. I understand that technology is a cost. It's actually a relatively small cost in most cases. And then we want to look at from that baseline, the what ifs of making changes, right? So handle time and call volume are the big hitters, right? So it's why people get so excited about self-service, for example, thinking it's going to make volume go away, or technologies that could shorten handle time on most calls or every call. Traditionally, screen pops has been a very attractive one for that reason, but most people already are getting that benefit, right? So it's looking at what other things can we do to impact handle time. When we were talking about the complex processes, for example, that's a wonderful target to get some streamlining that also makes the agent job better, right? They hate doing tedious things. They hate doing things that are rough on the customer, like difficult authentication processes. Those have a high handle time cost. They also impact agent experience and customer experience. So we want to look at those kinds of things, but we also want to look at those things that impact attrition, right? So we started talking about attrition as that big challenge. If we can help agents become more productive and more proficient faster, we're going to get a benefit. If we don't attrit so much, and often the attrition is very early. I have a lot of clients who will tell us that our attrition is within the first 3 to 6 months. So we've made this huge investment in hiring and training, and then we lose good people because we call it the O factor. They're overwhelmed. So really looking at things that can help agents succeed faster, be productive, be successful, and therefore hopefully happier agents, more engaged agents. We're going to have benefits there as well. So people need to get that cost structure understood and then play out those what ifs of if I make these kinds of changes, technology, processes, how we use people, we can show the benefits of that. And my example earlier about staffing to the workload and making a request for a budget based on that, it's an education and awareness building with your executives to show them the value of making the right investments there.
Well, and I think you hit it right on the head too. We recently brought on a new chief data scientist, a guy named Rick Kosiba, who's been in the workforce management space for, I don't know, ever. And one of his kind of, we call them Rick-isms, but one of his best Rick-isms is that a successful agent is one who knows that they're successful and knows that their managers know it as well, right?
Yeah.
So then you get that empowerment, that engagement. I mean, just basically a personal investment in not only the contact center team, but in the larger company. And then you start getting better performance and more expertise. And if you can get over that attrition hump, then you've got people who are just training to become real experts at their job. So I love the way we frame that. Again, keep your leadership in strategy mode and stay focused on showing overall success of the contact center. And I firmly believe that as we're able to show those successes where the executives are looking for it, then we start to gain the respect back for the role of the contact center in the overall company as a whole. So there you have it. Lori, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I'll just close with a reminder that we thank you for investing the half hour with us here, and it becomes more valuable if you take action on what you learned. Adult Learning Principle 101, right? So we've given you a couple things that could be fun little exercises that have you take that forward and take a new look at some of the things in your center, and so we hope people do that. Yep,
great. So yeah, we'll be sending plenty of good material right to everybody's inbox. Look for the challenges and priorities survey. Look for the couple of articles that we had mentioned. And then also, I mentioned our chief data scientist, Rick Kosiba. He's actually going to do a webinar on Thursday. So if you're super into math and metrics, you might cruise over to CRM Exchange and get signed up for his webinar on Thursday. He's going to do a deep dive into what makes good contact center metrics and maybe what makes not so good contact center metrics. So just a little plug for him. The recording of this will also be available to you if you're watching the recording sometime in the future. Hello from the past. We missed you. But yeah. All right. So I'll wrap us up here. Lori, thanks for joining us. Marcia, thanks for hanging out and being so quiet and delightful generally. Thanks to all of you who showed up for us in person. We'll go ahead and let you go and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.